Hey everybody, it's First Warn Storm Team Chief Meteorologist Brad Pittman. Hope you're having a great Friday. It is May 15th, and this is WCNC's Weather School for May 15th. 48th episode, by the way. Today's topic is really cool. We've been doing this the last couple of Fridays, taking a group topic and putting it all together. And today is going to be all about the First Warn Storm Team's most memorable weather events that they have covered. So I'm going to go first, and then we'll go to Larry, and then Aisha and Chris. So my most memorable weather event, I've got a ton of them, but to be honest with you, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Hurricane Katrina, by far the most influential, substantial event that I have covered in my entire career when I went back to New Orleans to cover the storm. I'm going to show you some pictures from that event. Now, a little backstory on this. I used to work at WWL in New Orleans, Louisiana, before I came to Charlotte in December 2002. So 2002 is when I basically took the job. I started on air January 2003. So I'd been in Charlotte for two whole years almost. And I kept in contact. This was our sister station, so we were owned by the same company. So I kept in contact with the new meteorologist who had taken my position. And obviously, I'm still friends with a lot of people there at the station. And when Katrina was forming in the Gulf, I knew from my 4 years of experience there, it was going to be bad. So I reached out via email to the weekend meteorologist and said, hey, just so you know, if you need any help, let me know. I'll help you remotely, do whatever I can. And lo and behold, they had just lost a meteorologist, and his wife was about to go into labor that weekend. They were going to be short staffed. So they basically called me and said, hey, can you come down, talk to my news director? My boss said, get on a plane, flew down to New Orleans 3 days before the storm formed. And lo and behold, I start covering the hurricane the minute I get off the plane, rode the whole thing out in New Orleans, stayed 2 weeks covering the storm, came back for a week, went back to cover Hurricane Rita, which affected Southwest Louisiana, for another 2 weeks, came back to Charlotte, and then I went to cover Hurricane Wilma down in South Florida for our station and NBC News. So basically, I felt like Jim Cantori for about 2 months, just chasing hurricanes all over the Gulf Coast. And 2005 was a crazy year, if you don't remember. And just a couple pictures I wanted to pass along to you. This one in particular, you could see right there, right there. Look at that picture. That to me says a lot about the weather center when I got in there and just how scared. That's Carl Arredondo. He's retired now. He was my chief meteorologist. It was basically him and I covering the entire storm. Here was us preparing. We basically had air mattresses to sleep on, but we also were going to use them for flotation devices. This is where we rode the storm out, this big ballroom in the Hyatt Regency Superdome. It was not the greatest experience. Everybody's crammed in this room. We ended up having no air conditioning, no plumbing, nothing that night. This was the doorway to the hotel. You could see they were getting ready for the flood. The next day, we woke up. Everything's, no power, water coming down. We weren't allowed to go up to our rooms in this hotel. We were stuck in that ballroom for the whole time. Super loud, just loud noise. We get outside and see, all the damage from the wind. We had no idea at this point that the levees had failed because communication was just non-existent. So our goal was to get everyone together and go back to the station. So here's just pictures from that morning after it hit the parking lot. I was able to go up to my room and get my stuff. And when I went up to my room, this was the view out of my window. The windows were shattered. I had something on that table, got sucked out, and I could see the Superdome. And that's what my view from my room was, looking over at the Superdome from the Hyatt Regency Superdome Hotel, which that was a room I was supposed to be staying in, never stayed in it, except for the first night I arrived there. Slept on the floor for weeks. Basically, this is what we did. We moved around, went back to the station, and as we're going back to the station, we start seeing how bad the buildings are. In particular, the views of our hotel that we had just come from right there. Every single window on that side of the building was completely blown out by the wind. Rocks and stuff getting picked up off of roofs, blown into that side of the building, just shattered every single window. Those are the drapes flying out the windows. We go back to the station. We're going to start broadcasting from the station again. We really didn't know the devastation of the flooding till the following morning when we were told to get out because the water was rising. So it was one of those experiences, excuse me, that I don't think I'll ever forget, just because of all the destruction and going through that and riding it out. It was a crazy experience. And since I've been in Charlotte, I've had several memorable weather events, not maybe as bad as Katrina, but Matthew and Florence would be up there. Francis, Gaston with the flooding and tornadoes. Couple big snowstorms. The 2004 snowstorm in February, where we got 22. Charlotte was unbelievable. One of the most memorable snow events of my entire life, actually, because that would have been a great storm regardless of where you live up north. But for Charlotte, it was probably the snowstorm that most of us will remember. A lot of big flooding events, a lot of heat waves. I remember some horrible heat waves and droughts, hitting 104 degrees 3 days in a row back in 2011. Crazy weather we've had. We get some amazing weather in Charlotte. And this is why I love living here, because it's just fascinating the kind of weather we get here. But that's my story. Let's hear from the rest of the weather team, some of their most memorable events. And I think we're going to know for sure, Larry, probably going to talk about Hurricane Hugo, because he had a huge part in our station covering that. Here's the rest of the weather team with their most memorable weather.
Memorable weather events that we've covered in our career. Now, since I've been here at WCNC Charlotte for so long, there have been quite a few. I made a list right here. Big snowstorms and big ice storms and tornadoes and severe thunderstorms and floods. And, well, there's one that I will never, ever forget. This hurricane. Hurricane Hugo, September 1989, made its way all across the Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles, and made landfall just north of Charleston, South Carolina, the morning of September 22nd, 1989, and it came all the way to Charlotte, something that we had never, ever seen before, a hurricane that came across land and moved right here into the Charlotte area. Now, the damage was unbelievable. Thousands and thousands of trees were knocked down. Power was out over 2 weeks in many neighborhoods, and so much damage to hundreds and hundreds of homes right here in the area. Those of us who went through that will never, ever forget that morning of September 22nd, 1989, all the damage and all really the fact that so many people were affected by this. We were actually on the air outside our studios, the old building over off Hood Road, over near the university area. We're outside, and in fact, here's a picture of that building right there. That's our old studios. It got so bad outdoors, we came inside the station, our old building there, and that was probably a mistake coming inside. Yes, inside, because something crazy happened. Here I am on the air in our old studios, describing what was going on, talking about the winds, hurricane force winds, power outages. I could actually step outside the station here and hear big transformers exploding and trees crashing. And at one point, I kind of heard something, a little strange sound, and then it became a big sound. I looked up and glanced and saw part of our ceiling collapsed right in front of me in the studio. Hundreds and hundreds of pounds of ceiling came right there in front of me. You can see me glancing at that. So at that time, I said, back to you guys in the newsroom, and I was out of there on my hands and knees. I really wasn't sure I was going to make it out of that studio without the whole thing collapsing around me. Something I will never, ever forget. Hurricane Hugo, September 22nd, 1989. Now that's a memory.
The most memorable experience in my career was covering Hurricane Florence. Now, I've been covering hurricanes my entire career, so I forecasted in the mid-Atlantic, I forecasted along the southeast coast as well, but with Hurricane Florence, it was a little bit different because I was actually sent to the coast to cover Hurricane Florence, and I have never done that before that point. Previously, I would forecast the hurricane, say from the studio or from afar, but being in the bullseye of where this hurricane made landfall and being able to see how people were preparing before it made landfall and just how people were reacting and having to manage my own anxiety and stress as well was just completely new territory for me. Hurricane Florence made landfall as a Category 1 hurricane actually in the Wilmington area, and I'm very familiar with the Wilmington area. I worked there for a little over 2 years. And so just being back in that area to cover this hurricane, it's something I will never forget. I do think overall, when it comes to hurricanes, growing up in southeastern Virginia, no stranger to hurricanes at all. I remember the storm that most impacted my life, I would say Hurricane Isabel back in 2003. I wasn't actually a broadcast meteorologist at that point, but I just remember how that storm impacted my life, my family's life. I saw the damage that storm did. We were without power, me and my family, for almost a month. We had to stay with my grandmother. And I just remember the damage and the just the impact that Hurricane Isabel had on our region and just on my life period. And that storm I will certainly never forget.
April 9th, 2011. That's my most memorable moment in my career. It was in my first market, Sioux City, Iowa. I was about in year 2 of my job, and when I worked at the station called KCAU or ABC 9. I was the weekend meteorologist. This happened on a Saturday, and our chief meteorologist, Fred Hexum, came in to do some team coverage because we were under a slight risk. And back then, there were only 4 tiers. It's marginal, slight, moderate, and high. We didn't have the enhanced that we have now, but we also had a 10% chance for tornadoes. That's very significant, and we also live in the Plain States in the top of Tornado Alley. We were on air for 5.5 hours as 19 confirmed tornadoes ripped through our viewing area, ranging anywhere from EF0 to EF4 strength. That's 65 to 85 mile per hour winds to an EF4 strength, which is over 165 mile per hour winds. The most iconic moment through all this is I was monitoring the NWS chat. The radar was lit up with tornado warning after tornado warning, confirmed tornadoes, debris balls showing that there was debris and that this storm was impacting communities. But the most iconic moment was I said, Fred, there's a large wedge tornado moving right towards downtown Mapleton. Anyone watching in Mapleton needs to get underground right now. It's not an if, it means you need to go now. 60% of the town was decimated. 14 people were injured, but I'm happy to say that no one lost their life. And this was a huge, huge system, and many people were coming up to us weeks afterwards saying, hey, we were watching your report and we got underground. This isn't a very big community, but they were all watching. But this storm wasn't done. This was a supercell. This was my first experience of a true supercell. At one point in Pocahontas County, our far eastern viewing area, there were 5 tornadoes on the ground all at once. I got to go assess the damage there the next day, and it's like something I've never seen before. It was about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive. That's how big our viewing area is, that time in all directions. And the damage, it's so open out there, but you could just see the scars in the earth. It really just captivated you. But the story that I did the next day was this house that was ripped in half. You could still see the bed that was in place, but the toilet was gone. Forks were sticking in the walls. The stairway was now under a skylight. And the family there said that they decided to go to their grandma's that night to see how she was. And it's a good thing that they weren't home because their neighbor's house was completely lifted off the foundation. This was a huge and memorable event, and 2011 goes down in history as one of the worst tornado months in history, where just 7 days later here in North Carolina, there was also an outbreak on April 16th, 2011. I'm meteorologist Chris Mulcahy, and that was my most memorable weather story.
Yeah, just incredible stories. And that's what happens throughout your career. You cover all kinds of different weather events, and some of them certainly stick with you more than others. And who knows, there may be more memorable events ahead for different reasons. So Thanks for tuning in today. We're going to keep a weather school going next week. We'll be back on Monday at 1 o'clock. And remember, you can go to our YouTube channel, WCNC.com, or our YouTube page. We got a playlist, 48 now, I think, episodes of WCNC there for others. So go check them out if you get a chance, and go check out Weather School. Thanks for tuning in today.